Welcome to the arena. My name is Greg Sindelar, and today we're joined by Representative David Spiller. Representative Spiller, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you having me.
Well, of course. Well, you have, let's start. The purpose of this is to get to know you a little bit, but I think what's really interesting is you have actually one of the more rural districts in Texas and one of the most interesting districts in Texas. So maybe tell us a little bit about your district, and then I want to get into your background.
Yeah, well, when I came in 21 and we did redistricting after that, I went from having the strangest looking district in the House to having the strangest looking district in the House. So, in fact, there are a couple of different parts to it, but it's kind of connected between a couple counties by about 300 yards there that makes it all contiguous. But no, I go everywhere up on the Red River, Cook.
Yeah, because you run all the way up to on the west side of Wichita Falls, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I come around James Frank over there.
Yeah.
He picked up some of my counties, and I picked up some other folks' counties. So instead of my district the old district going out west and northwest, now it goes kind of west or a little bit east, west, and then down south. So I've got 12 rural counties, Cook, Montague, Jack, where I live, Young, Throckmorton, Shackelford, Eastland, Brown, Comanche, Mills, San Saba, and Lampasas.
Yeah.
So my district from Austin, for where we are now, is only about an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But you keep driving about 3 more hours, you're still in my district.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and they had a whole article about one of your counties and how it's I think they called it the most Trumpiest part of Texas or something like that.
Well, interesting, because my district, when at the election, there were, I think, 9 House districts where Trump got over 80%, at or above 80%, and mine was by far the top.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's Trump country for
Exactly.
sure.
Exactly.
Well, so tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, no one gets into the legislature. We know you're not making any money off of it, right?
Yeah, my wife has reminded me of that. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
That's right. Well, and especially last session when it never ended, right? It was very, very, very tough for many of y'all. But tell us, where you grew up, a little bit of your background, and why you decided to run for office in the first place.
Well, I'm born and raised in Jacksboro, about an hour northwest of Fort Worth, about halfway between Wichita Falls and Fort Worth. Born and raised there, went to college, went to law school, came back and practiced law with my dad, my younger brother. They had since passed away, but now my wife and I have 2 sons, and they went to law school and decided they wanted to come back and practice law with me. So there are 3 of us there, and so we do that, and also own a title company. I think it's the oldest family-owned title company in the state.
Really?
Started by my great-granddad in 1888.
That's interesting.
And so, but we do a little bit of everything. I do a lot of litigation. I've been the city attorney for over 35 years. I've been the general counsel of the hospital district for over 30 years. I also, really the only office that I held prior to this was being on the school board. I was on our trustee on our local school board for 26 years. That's more than anybody in the legislature. So, so I did that. But I'd always thought about, to answer your question, I'd always thought about running, but I just it never really lent itself to that. We were busy raising kids, and then, after my dad and my brother passed, I was doing the work of 3 lawyers and running a title company, and I just said, look, God, I understand it just wasn't meant to be. And so I had a real good life. My sons came back, did all that, and then everything changed when Drew Springer decided to run for the Senate, and it opened up, and I thought of every reason why I shouldn't do it, and then finally decided to jump in and do it. And so that's what we've been doing. And I could not do that without the love and support of my wife, Ginger, and also my 2 sons that allow me to come do this, although we probably communicate at least a dozen times a day back and forth about cases and things that we got going on. So
They get really, when you're in the middle of a hearing, they get really frustrated because you're not answering fast enough.
they're kind of used to it by now. When I first started, it was kind of panic mode, and they're both young. So, but they've done very well. They do. I couldn't ask for better law partners. They do a great job.
That's fantastic. That is like the dream as a father, right? Like, to work with your kids like that. That's amazing.
And what's fun when you get, it's kind of like an old Western when you got the family. When you fight one of us, you fight all of us, and that's kind of the way this deal is. And we work on stuff together, and we had a really big case and did a deposition that we worked on a couple weeks ago and took and which I took in Wichita Falls and immediately drove down here to the Capitol for meetings. But it's a lot of fun. It's fun.
That's a pretty drive though. You probably come
It's
on the west
gorgeous.
side through the
Yeah,
hill
we
country.
stay away from 35.
Oh, always,
But
always.
but yeah, you take 281 to Lampasas, and
Oh
so I
yeah,
cut through some of Mike Alcott's and Shelby Slosson's district a little bit, but or you can come down a little bit farther west and stay almost completely in my district.
yeah.
So yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's wonderful. Well, so you came to Austin. Tell me first, what was different about it than maybe what you expected, and then what's been the biggest thing you've learned as a legislator that maybe you didn't know going into it.
What I've learned is it's really not as different as you'd think. Now, when I came through, there was so much I didn't know, so I
Yeah.
was like drinking water through a fire hose.
Yeah.
And when I came in at first, it was a special election. I wasn't sworn in until March the 9th, which be the equivalent of coming in about today.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
so there was so much I didn't know, and we were working hard, but we got a lot of good things done. And then last session was great. And then after you do several special sessions, you feel like an old pro. So it's been good. But the most important thing is you realize that this process and what you do here is not unlike what you've done for the rest of your life, because with life is built on relationships.
Yep.
And you build those relationships and you work with people and they trust you and you shoot straight with them. And really that's what it is here. And a lot of people come from a bigger city and they get here and they think it's like that, and they don't realize that this thing's kind of like a small town. It's kind of
Yep.
like Jacksboro. If you do something on one end of town, the other folks,
Yeah.
the other end of town knows it within 10 minutes. Well, that's kind of the way it works here.
Yeah.
And some folks have to learn that the hard way. But no, I think you just treat people fairly and shoot straight with them and work hard, and you build that respect and build those relationships that you just keep for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think that's such a really good point, because most people don't understand that. And I'm always telling our people, at the end of the day, we're actually in a relationship business, right?
Exactly.
Like obviously the policy is what's driving us forward, but the only way to get that done is through building the relationships. And building relationships isn't rocket science. If you read Dale Carnegie, you can kind of figure out how to build a relationship, but it just takes effort, and it takes what I call like shoe leather work. Like you got to be over at the Capitol, you got to be present with members like yourself or your staff. That the staff especially is very important, because they need to trust you and trust the information you're giving them, and that's how you kind of build momentum behind some of these ideas. Yeah.
And I'm blessed with a great staff. Susanna Feather, my chief of staff, has been with me since I first got here, and she's just like family. And we've got a great team, and they're all doing a great job for me. So it all works out. So.
Well, and personnel's policy, right? Like if you're going to try to get anything done, it's going to be because you have extraordinary people working with you. That's how you get extraordinary things done.
Right.
So, one of the things that I think is one of the great traditions at the Capitol is boot day. You have a wonderful pair of boots on yourself, right? And, I know that this year, when a bootmaker from your district, Fenolio Boots, is going to be here. Can you talk a little bit about that tradition and a little bit about Fenolio Boots?
Well, they would come every year, and then this year we especially promoted them and let everybody know. We had a lot of new members coming in, and I think they did some really good business, but they do a great job, and they're very fair with the process. And I've had people say, look, they're great with their service too, because if there's ever an issue or something needs to be addressed, they come back, they deal with it. They'll be back here in another month to deliver boosts to people, and also to address any kind of concerns that may come up. And I'm sure if somebody decide, hey, I need a pair of boots or I need another pair of boots,
They
just
come
give
do
me a
it,
holler,
yeah.
and we'll get you fixed up. So no, they're great people. I've come to know them very well. I've known of them for many years. They're in Montague County, which is contiguous to Jack. And so, but I've known those folks forever, and they are super, super people.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's part of what makes it feel like a small town, is you have like kind of customs like that here every session. But obviously the important part of session is trying to get important things done for the state. If I'm not mistaken, in the state of the state, the governor called you out that you're carrying one of his bills. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the legislation does?
Well, the bill that I was asked to help, to carry in the House, the bail reform. Since then, that has changed a little bit. Representative Smithy is going to do that in the House, which is fine. I support all those things and will support them and help in every way. But I don't have that, but I've got plenty of other things to keep me busy, well, between border stuff
Well, I was
and,
like, you're kind of also the border guy, right?
well, yeah,
Even
I've kind of
you're
done
trying
that.
to keep Oklahoma, I guess, out
Right.
in your district, but you've led on that a lot. Last session, you really were at one of the people at the tip of the spear, along with Representative Guillen and others in the House. Can you talk a little bit about some of your border bills?
Got several. Found, I mean, we've got the big one that's coming up is the 287G, Section 287G bill. And people think, well, what is that? And it's where we ask, compel local law enforcement to assist the federal government, the Trump administration, in removing and deporting those people that are here illegally that have criminal warrants out
Yep.
for them. And it just encourages those law enforcement agencies, counties, and cities. My bill covers both, to participate in that program to assist in removing those folks from our communities. There's a number of different programs within that they can do. It doesn't have to cost them
Yeah.
money or anything. But my view is, if that's the law and that's what the federal government is doing to enforce the law to help keep us safe, then we as local law enforcement agencies in Texas need to cooperate and need to assist in that to keep our state and our country safe from these folks that pose a public safety risk to us, that are here, whether they be terrorists, whether they be violent gang members, whether they're convicted felons, sexual assault, child molestation, those type of things. We need to be able to remove those folks from our country that are here illegally anyway.
Yeah.
So that's the focus, and that's what that bill does. I've got several others. One is the alien track bill that requires law enforcement to report. They're authorized to do so under state law and under federal law, but to report if someone is here illegally that is arrested on a separate charge and detained, charged, arrested, convicted, prosecuted, that we need to know. Those people may be in a federal database, and we don't even, some law enforcement agencies are not cooperating and trying to address those things. So I've got that. I've got an E-Verify bill that deals with all political subdivisions, not just state contractors and subcontractors, what we have right now. So I've got that. I tell you what, I filed a criminal justice bill as a result of going down to the border. We had a meeting in Kinney County sometime back with on a landowner's compensation, that bill, and we talked about a lot of issues there. And I heard so many people say, we're not safe in our front yard. I'm not talking about at night. I'm talking about during the daytime, and we can't let our children go out. And I thought, this is America. This is Texas. This is happening in Texas. It's not happening in my district necessarily, but it's happening in Texas. We've got to do something to address it. And I was made aware of the situation where you've got defensive property, and there are a couple of those aspects of defensive property in the Code of Criminal Procedure that say that that defense only applies at nighttime. Well, these criminals have gotten so brazen. Nighttime means or daytime means nothing to them. So I even filed that bill to correct that in our law. So there are a lot of border related issues that we've got. I've got a hearing tomorrow on a bill that I filed before, but it enhances punishment for certain criminal offenses, and says if in the course and scope of committing that, if they have bypassed a port of entry or a lawful port of entry, that it enhances the punishment for those existing offenses. And if so, it makes them deportable under federal law, under 8 U.S.C. 1227. So I think that's a great bill. While we're waiting for SB 4 to be ruled constitutional, and we get into the temporary enforcement, and we have the trial of that in July. And so those are just some of the things that I've got going on.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. Right now we're lucky. It couldn't be more night and day, right, from the Biden administration to the Trump administration as far as what's happening on the border. But I think what those 4 years under Biden really illuminated to Texans is we can't be in that situation again.
We've learned our lesson that we can't. You assume, and part of this is because in past Democrat administrations, we've had cooperation. We've had people removed, deported, hundreds of thousands a year.
Yeah, I think Obama deported more people than Trump did in his first term.
A lot, yeah. And so we know that that's been under both parties until this time. And we just assume that common sense will prevail and those things aren't going to happen. But we can't assume that anymore. Yeah. Texans have to step out and protect Texas, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, amen. Well, that's such an important issue. And when we talk to people across state, it is always still the number one issue, even though it seems to be heading in the right direction. And it's important that Texas continues to ensure that we don't ever end up back where we were just a few short months ago. But, when you look at this session, I think one of the things that people will define it is all the education stuff, right? Like obviously the school choice stuff is, gets a lot of the oxygen is what people are talking about, and that's important. But there's a lot that's happening on workforce development, on teacher pay, on teacher funding, on school discipline. There's a myriad of bills that they're kind of addressing a lot of our issues. As somebody who served such a long time on the school board, can you talk a little bit about what you expect to see on the education side? And then I'd be really interested in hearing, because one of the things I've seen in a lot of rural counties is we have massive workforce shortages, right? And so what are we doing to address those workforce shortages?
Well, I've said, to your point, that this session, I think, will be marked by several things. One, unprecedented developments in education, and also water. Some of those type issues, I think those are going to be some of the big issues that people are going to say, that was a great session on those areas. I think another would be property tax reduction. I think we're going to continue with that, a lot of things. But with regard to education, yes, one of the things that's important to me is that there's such a huge disparity between even starting teacher pay between urban and suburban districts versus rural districts.
Yeah,
on average, that's about a $15,000 difference. And in some instances, and I was at a school forum in Eastland County about 2 or 3 months ago, and it's actually closer to $20,000 difference. That just shouldn't be the case. And so one of the things that I like about the school funding bill in the House is that it prioritizes and increases the small and mid-sized school allotment to the tune of $1.1 billion. And that's badly needed in my counties, in my districts, because we've got some great schools, but we don't need to be shortchanged in comparison to other students and in that respect as far as that funding. And so I think we're going to see the additional funding that my public school districts need, but I think we're also going to give something for parents that maybe choose something different for their children. They will have that opportunity to do those things. So there's a little something there for everyone. And what I've told people in my district, I said, look, I understand your concerns. I hear what you're saying, but you're not going to be adversely affected by this. These other folks in urban and suburban areas are giving in on this issue that helps you. Everyone benefits, and that's the way this process works. Everyone works together to come up with something that's a win for everybody, and I think that we're going to have that.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think everybody can agree that we're trying to, reach the potential of every child in this state, right? And understanding that someone might need different opportunities, and there's educational issues across the state that are very unique, right? What is happening in Houston's can be very different than what's happening
Absolutely.
in Jacksboro, right?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, you don't understand what your neighbor's problems are until you get to know your neighbor and visit with your neighbor.
Yeah, true.
And it goes the other way too. And so I think there's been a lot of working together between urban, suburban representatives, rural representatives, and I think we've got a good cooperation, and we got a plan moving forward. I just ask people to give us time to come up with the best thing. I have full faith and confidence in Chairman Buckley with public ed getting that thing shepherded through and done. And I think we'll work with the Senate and the Lieutenant Governor, get something done. The Speaker has done a great job overseeing that. And I think we'll get something to Governor Abbott's desk that he can sign and that Texas can be proud of.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and I think one of the interesting things that'll be on the rural side is how you might use these ESAs really in maybe more public-public partnerships or even public-private partnerships on the workforce development side. And I've been in some of these rural communities talking to some of these superintendents or school board members, and I don't think they'd always looked at it that way. And but they recognize that, most of these counties are kind of in population decline, slowly losing folks because they're leaving for various reasons. Sure. It might be access to healthcare, so it's not a great place for family or elderly. But usually it's for economic opportunities, right? And so I think the more that we can really help strengthen the workforce development side in rural communities, I think the better system that we can create for them, because that will really, I think, change a lot of the economic outlook of this in these
Right.
communities.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, and that's important. I always tell people, I was like, rural Texas, that's where the values of Texas are held. I was like, I live in Austin, Texas.
Right.
I can assure you, they're not held in Austin, Texas.
No, and we have great schools. In House District 68, I have 59 public schools. I represent 59 public schools, 54 traditional, 5 charters. Also have 9 private schools. So, and a number of people that homeschool, different areas more so than others. And so I respect what, everybody wants the best for their kids. I want the best for my kids. You want the best for yours. We all want parents to be able to make the best choices for their kids, and hopefully we're getting there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's kind of a new dawn on education in Texas. And sometimes it's difficult to work through that. But I think if we continue to work together and work the process together, we'll kind of figure it out, to your point, where it's a win-win for kids and families, most importantly, but also educators as well.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So last question as we wrap, and this is maybe the most difficult question I'm going to ask you. But when we're in your district, what are the things that we need to do? And most importantly, where are the places we need to eat?
Well, the thing you need to do, I tell people, you can't get, when you look at my district, you can't go west unless you go to Oklahoma. Nobody wants to go to Oklahoma. But if you go west out of Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, even Austin, you have to drive through my district. So I tell all my state rep friends, look, you don't have to, just check in with me. Text me, let me know you're going through. I like to know what's going on in my district. But there's a bunch of things to do. It's great people, great food, great hunting.
Yep.
Pecans everywhere. It's beautiful. I mean, come and visit and look. There are all sorts of things wherever you go in the district. And I'll tell you, as far as food, it's hard to narrow it down.
Yeah. This is why it's the hardest question.
It really is. I mean, you go from up in Cook County, you go to Lindsay, Texas. It's a community of about 1,045 people. And they have more restaurants, and the best restaurants probably per capita than any city in the state. They've got, Dieter Brothers. They've got the Smokehouse. They've got the other steakhouse. I mean, they've got everything. Yeah. Then you go all the way down south to Lampasas at Eve's Cafe on the square, and you've got the best German food you've ever eaten. Or you can go to San Saba and the Pecan House Grill. And in fact, one of my congressmen says that overlaps with me there, says August Pfluger says that's the best food he's ever eaten in his life. And so
you've got tell all of his constituents in Midland that's how he feels.
yeah. So no, we've got all sorts of things. Jacksboro, where I live, we hadn't been shortchanged. We've got some good places. Young County, Shackford County, you've got what was the Beehive. It changed hands now. It's the Good Night Steakhouse. Fantastic place to eat. The Ice House is there. There's several places even in Comanche and Goldthwaite and Mills County, all sorts of, I went campaigning and walked, and I was going, and it's hard to block walk in my district. So I was going one night, and I had a little bit of time. I was down in Comanche, and there was a restaurant too, and there were a ton of people out, and there was a bar there that had like a grand opening. And so you've heard of block walking. Well, I went bar walking. There were 3 bars in a row, and you can't imagine the number of constituents you'll run into.
I think I did that in college a few times.
So no, a lot of great places. Hard to choose. To choose.
That's wonderful.
But if you're just passing through Lampasas, don't have time, you can stop at Storms. Everybody stops at Storms on the way through. So
that's right. I've been there. Well, and I always find that our small towns, there's just a charm, right? That's what makes it so special. You have usually the courthouse, the county courthouse, and these wonderful, beautiful Texas squares. And it's, I don't know, there's something just, like almost like a postcard about it that I love.
And a lot of these communities in my district have reinvested either through the Main Street program or through something to reinvest in their downtown, and they're building back up and working on their downtowns where they're that much more beautiful. So that's always good to see. Yeah,
that's right. Well, Representative Spiller, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being in the arena and doing what you do. We know it's a sacrifice, but good thing you have your sons kind of looking after the business while you're down here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. And thank each of you for watching this episode of The Arena. We'll see you on the next episode.